Mr. Yeski will be seated for Mr. Levy. Postponed this evening are items number 5, number 7, number 12, and number 13. Item number 1 on the agenda is Greenwich Parks and Recreation.
Good evening. Joe Siciliano, for the record, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Sorry, Joe. Mr. Maitland, did you want to mention publicly that you will not be taking the decision on J&J this evening, and it will be next Monday?
Oh, you may make that announcement.
Okay, thank you. So the decision on 16A, the Sheep Hill Road application, that will be decided at a special meeting on Monday, September 25th at 4 o'clock in this room. And the reason for that is the scheduling of the voting members, so we've decided to have a special meeting just to have that decision. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm here to represent the first item on your agenda, which is a lease for the Garden Education Center. If you've read through the package, the Garden Education Center has been in the Garden Education Building at the Pine Needham on Bible Street for the past 60 years, has had numerous leases with the town, and are good partners with the town, and a good representative of the type of community activities we'd like to have at that location. It's pretty cut and dry. It is very basic, simple to the last 20-year lease that they had. The insurance has been updated. And in this lease, there's a request, which is item number 2, which is a sublease for another not-for-profit organization to use space in the building.
Okay.
That's my presentation.
Any comments from the commission? Comments from the public? Then we'll close this item. Do I have a motion?
I hereby move that we approve this municipal improvement for the lease agreement between the town of Greenwich and the Greenwich Garden Education Center at the Pine Needham. In so doing, the commission notes that this is consistent with the plan of conservation and development, specifically with item 6.30 to continue to support community organizations.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Second item on your agenda is a request for a sublease at the Garden Education Center by the Greenwich Tree Conservancy, another local not-for-profit organization. As I read through the comments, there was a comment from the commission in the staff report that said that they weren't quite sure what the space was going to be used for, but it's going to be used for office space for the Greenwich Tree Conservancy. Joanne Messina is here tonight from the Greenwich Tree Conservancy, the executive director, if there's any questions, but primarily it's going to be a section of the building that's going to be used for office space to forward their effort as the conservancy.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? Questions from the public? Then we'll close this item. May I have a motion?
I hereby move that we approve the municipal improvement for the sublease agreement between the Garden Education Center and the Greenwich Tree Conservancy to use a portion of the building at the Pine Needham Park at 0 Bible Street. In so doing, we note first that the Tree Conservancy will use this space for offices, and also that it is consistent with the plan of conservation and development in supporting the activities of or community activities, as well as preserving the environment.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 3, 421 Field Point.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Tom Hegney on behalf of the applicant. This is a 3-lot subdivision on the east side of Field Point Road. It's located.
Do an MI for something at the Pine Needham instead.
I liked how the meeting was moving along in the right direction. I'm hoping that that will
Sorry,
continue.
Mr. Hegney, please continue.
There's always a bump in the road somewhere.
Yeah, let's hope it's farther down the road then. We're proposing a 3-lot subdivision on this property. There'll be 1 front lot, 2 rear lots, and a 15% open space parcel. The front lot is 35,000 square feet. The rear lots, exclusive of the access ways, are roughly 23,000 and 21,000. They meet the frontage requirements or access ways. They meet the lot shape, and of course, they meet the area requirements. It is currently developed as a large single-family house in the center of the site, right here. Lawn in the front, lawn behind the house, and then a tennis court to the rear. We also have a site plan, which has been submitted for your review along with the various town departments. The site plan, as presented, shows the house footprints for each of the lots, the driveways, the parking areas, drainage systems, utility connections, swimming pools, walls, and grading. We've also run this by the wetland agency that has signed off with a green sheet since there are no wetlands on the site. I know that you have received a memo from the town engineer indicating that he would like to review this with our engineer. One of the difficulties in timing is the memo comes out on a Friday. Town engineer is only available on a Wednesday. We meet tonight on a Tuesday, and so we do have scheduled tomorrow afternoon a meeting with Mr. Marucci. I went through the items that are on the site plan because I think it's important as part of the overall subdivision process. A site plan is an integral part of what you review as the subdivision process. If that were not the case, all I'd really need to present is this record sheet showing that I meet the basic site plan or zoning requirements. However, as part of this, you want to see how these lots would be developed. And I think in discussing or going over the discussion you had yesterday regarding what regulations apply, it seems to me that if a site plan is an integral part of the process and we're holding up a vote on this subdivision because the town engineer needs to review it in greater detail, that the regulations that are in effect at the time that we filed the application should be the ones that apply. If that is not the case, then I think I have a record sheet that meets all of the zoning criteria, and it would warrant an approval tonight because I have to go back through the process with the town engineer anyway, and if the new regulations are going to apply, then I submit a different site plan than what I submitted as part of the original process for the subdivision itself. And that was the thought process I had in reacting to the discussion that you had with council yesterday. So I realize that it's something that you do as a matter of course, require the town engineer to opine on this. We, as I said, do have an appointment with him tomorrow afternoon to go over the issues. Mr. Frangione is here to answer any of the questions you have regarding the engineering, but we took the same approach we took to 500 Lake Avenue in terms of how the drainage is handled, and Mr. Marucci did sign off on that.
Well, in addition to DPW wanting to see you, there were some comments that we got in today, I think, from Sewer Department. And they had a couple of...
A couple of things that they wanted you to look at before we approve it. The first bullet, the third bullet, I think those are the key ones. Is your mic on? No. But we're not in Yeah, so it's just it's just the first and the third bullets.
They're correct that there is a sewer line that seems to run down through to the east to Shore Road toward the sewer plant. I've run into this once before on a property just immediately to the north, where the existing sewer line for the house meandered through a couple of properties, and 3 or 4 other properties were tied into it. He may be referring to something like that. In that case, we actually extended the sewer line up Field Point Road from the corner of Shore Road and connected that house to this new sewer line in Field Point Road. We were thinking that we would be doing the same thing here.
Well, I think that's part of it, but also, I think there's a note on your subdivision map.
It's just to do it now,
If you could look at your subdivision map number 3,
the way he writes it when he wants to.
it says you're not looking for any easements or anything that are on this property, and I think that's a deficiency of this. We would have to have, if there's any known, I mean, if there is in fact a sewer going through the property. There was a question about an easement or something on the back part of the property on a prior subdivision. And I think we ought to get a more positive statement stating there are no easements on this property, as opposed to we don't know if there are any.
That's fine. The easement that I was talking about, or the sewer line I was talking about, actually runs through the property to the east, benefiting this property, not that there's an easement on the
But I
property
think that would
itself.
probably factor into what the sewer department's going to talk to you about, and it might, in a sense, reorient the way you're running lines or something on the property.
It could, and it's certainly something we can investigate.
So that's that. I think it was either said in the staff report or something that you were going to come in with a restoration plan for the open space.
Yes,
And I
and
think,
my clients are working on that, and I
Okay,
figured
that's-
since we weren't going to have a vote tonight, that we could get that to you shortly.
just a small bump. But I think that also should be then, once you get that restoration plan done, it ought to be on a drawing with a number or name or something, and then we can acknowledge it on the subdivision map.
We'll have it from a landscape architect. so
But
we
it can be
submit.
acknowledged on the subdivision.
On the
map.
subdivision plan,
Right.
sure.
And the access to the open space for Lot 2.
Yeah,
Oh, the pedestrian access, right.
That's true,
And the Shore Road thing,
because
Yeah.
Lot 2 is separated from the open space by the access way, and we do need to show,
Okay.
based on the requirements of the subdivision regulations, an easement over that access way.
Now, based on the rear lots, there's 2 different ones. There's an A and a B. And a B usually talks to the side-by-side ones where you then have a single road in the middle. Is that what you're proposing?
Yes.
Is there some way that you can maybe acknowledge that on the subdivision map also, that you are going to comply with I think it's B in the 131 section? A is for a single access, B is for a double access.
Yes,
Okay.
we certainly can add that.
I had a question, maybe you can talk to it, and that is, why has this not been submitted as a re-subdivision, since it was already on the subdivision map? I think it was 158.
Well, the map 158,
I'm sorry, it was 1783.
when we did the research on the deed history, this property has been in this configuration a very long time.
But
And
it was a part of a your narrative to us says it was part of a 5-lot subdivision?
I don't
Or is
believe that was one that was actually approved by the
It was,
commission itself, though.
I think it was, wasn't it that the one that was from 1958?
right.
Right. And as such, was not an approved or recorded map?
Right,
Right.
correct. And that actually is the piece that is east of here that was reconfigured, but did not include this specific piece itself.
I can't seem to find it right now, but wasn't this a part of a 5-lot subdivision at one time?
I don't believe so,
No.
no.
Okay, in 1958, there was a 5-lot division of the original Boyden property that occurred in 1958 and did not require a new road and was allowed under the then existing regulations. However, if this lot was a part of that 5-lot subdivision in 58,
I don't believe that was the case, Mr. Chairman.
okay, well.
I'll verify that.
In other words, was it a signed and recorded map?
Well, we're not going to answer.
I'll provide you with the
Okay.
backup on that.
Thank you.
And while Mr. Maitland, you're looking through that, you had mentioned previously that you needed to obviously address some of the issues from DPW, and so you're going to have to give us an extension in order to get to a subsequent meeting, ideally the second October meeting, so that it can leave you time to make the adjustments.
Given that we do need to meet with the town engineer tomorrow and then revise the plan so that he can then review it again, it would seem that the 17th would be the better meeting for us
Right.
to be
Right.
on.
And then on the other point that you were raising, the application you've submitted is for subdivision, and what you're doing when you show us that development plan is providing evidence to the Planning and Zoning Commission that the lots that you're proposing are in fact developable, which is what the commission is doing when they approve a subdivision map. You are not, however, and correct me if I'm wrong, submitting a site plan application with your subdivision application, but what you are doing is providing a site plan, but not the application. And therein lies the difference with the timing and the regulation, in my mind, but I think if that's not the way that you're seeing it, I would suggest that you submit a brief on that we could provide to the law department so that we can discuss that further in a subsequent meeting.
I'd be happy to do that.
Any other questions from the commission?
Was that the question about the 15-foot access easement on one of those previous maps, and what happened
I'd
to that?
mentioned that.
Oh, sorry, I missed it.
That was
That's
one of the
what-
easements. I just wanted
That's what
clarified.
runs east along the property to our east, from this property down to Shore Road.
I think as long as it's answered, either it is on the property or it's not, so. Any questions, Nick? Any questions from the public? Anybody hiding behind the board?
There are a number of people hiding behind the board, but none of them wish to speak on this
Nobody's hand is up, huh?
application.
All right, then we'll leave this open.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Now, we are kind of short-staffed here tonight, short of a commissioner here. Mr. Fox is recusing himself from this, so there will be 4 voting members on this if you want a decision tonight.
I think we're prepared to proceed with the 4 members representing a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Good.
This is 1275 King Street on the east side of King Street, currently occupied by Tudor Investments as their office, which has been approved through numerous, I think it was 7 variances over the years. Brunswick School is proposing to use this as its middle school campus. And what I have on the board here, to follow up on the discussions that we had at the September 7th meeting, is a circulation plan which shows how drop-off and pickup would be arranged. And buses would come in on the southerly drive on King Street, discharge in front of the building. Students would enter at the front entrance, and then the buses would exit at the traffic light across from Rye Lake Avenue. Parents would come in off the northerly driveway, drop off at the existing drop-off area that is on the north side of the building, enter the north side of the building into the school, and then the parents would then exit and use the light at Rye Lake and King Street. In the afternoon, buses would come in and queue along the front of the building. There is room for 11 full-size buses. We have 7 full-size and 2 small buses as part of the middle school program. We're anticipating that that would not increase. Parents come in and queue along the northerly drive and on the front of the northerly side of the building. We have taken out 12 parking spaces on the north side of this lot to allow for better circulation for parents to pull around and then exit onto King Street. By adding the islands here, we're actually 974 square feet better on the impervious surface. We've been able to add in that much in the way of green space on the property. We did have a meeting with the town traffic coordinator and your traffic consultant, Beta, last week. And they asked for a couple of things. One is they wanted more pavement markings to show where the walkways and crosswalks would be, signage describing better where the students come in and out of the building. And that's the plan that I have in front of you here. They also requested that we do a level of service analysis of existing conditions and proposed conditions. Mike Galante, our traffic engineer, prepared that and submitted that. And I know that you received a memo today from the engineering division indicating that they found that acceptable. A couple of things that they...
Well, as long as you have that out, they have 3 conditions in there. And
I
are those, you were just going to say it, okay.
I was just about to go through those, but
Stepping on your lines.
thank you for assisting me in the presentation. We would agree to do a traffic evaluation 6 months after the school starts here, which we're hoping will be September of 2018. Shuttle service will be provided between the two. Tom Phillip, the headmaster of the school, is here and has been very clear right from the beginning. There will be no pedestrian crossing of King Street between the 2 campuses. It will all be done by bus or shuttle. And the third is that we would continue to talk to the engineering division about any potential improvements that might be needed to the intersection of King Street and Rye Lake. I know the traffic circle has been brought up a number of times. I think it fits under the heading of a solution in search of a problem, because we do not have an issue here with the levels of service. Level of service B as it exists, level of service B as it...
They didn't refer to the traffic circle in their
No, but
approval,
that's
did they?
been something that's sort of hanging out there, and I just want to address it.
For the future,
Or not.
or not. Let me ask you a question. Since the road coming in on the south is one way in all the way, and that will be marked as such, is there any reason to still maintain that turnaround at the entrance? Aren't we better off
Right
getting rid of-
here?
Yeah.
Well, you still have staff which may exit here.
Oh, so that's not a
after.
one-way road?
No, this is two-way, one-way only during pickup and drop-off.
And there's a sign saying that?
South entrance, bus entrance only during morning drop-off and afternoon pickup. Two-way traffic to be maintained at all other times. That was another one of the notes that traffic
I'm just sort of
division
curious,
wanted.
is that, okay. You'd have to know when those things occur.
Well, you have to.
If you were a
put-
visitor or something, I mean,
Yeah, it would be a sign up that indicates what the hours are, that a
that's
bus
pretty
is
much
only at
what's done in
certain
the
time.
public school system, that certain things are done at half hour before or half hour after kind of thing.
Correct.
Okay.
This actually works better than most of the schools I've worked on over the years, because you do have a dedicated bus loop and you do have a dedicated parent loop, which really makes it work very well.
Still, to the circle in front of the building, exactly how does that work? And would it not be better turned back into green space?
We were just looking to make the changes that we needed to facilitate the parent drop-off. That's certainly something we can look at in the future, but I don't think it's something that
Okay.
we need to address at this point.
Other questions from the commission?
Yeah, Mr. Hegney, last time you mentioned that you were going to help out GEMS by giving them access to a building. Is that still the case?
I think what I said was a member of the board of GEMS had approached me and the school about being able to utilize one of the buildings, and that we were open to that and would continue that discussion as to whether it was the right size and in the right condition to be used by GEMS. We will continue to pursue that.
Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we're ready to close it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just lost something.
We need a motion.
Okay, hold on, I just lost a piece of the motion. Okay, well, I hereby move approval of this application for the Brunswick Middle School. In so doing, we note the following, that the Department of Public Works has okayed to go to building permit with 3 conditions, and these are that the plan submitted by Redness and Mead on September 15th is still missing the required accessible pedestrian ramps along the north side of the building, that the applicant must also connect with the crosswalks from the visitor parking lots. Second, that once the school has been fully operational for 6 months, a traffic evaluation of the King Street, Rye Lake Avenue driveway intersection, the King Street Southern driveway intersection, and the on-site circulation shall be submitted to the town for review. Depending on this, there shall be further evaluation and discussion. Third,
Was it on-site also, or was it just at the intersection?
on-site circulation, and the on-site circulation shall be submitted. Yes, did I not say that?
No, you did, but I didn't realize it included the on-site. I thought it was just the
Why don't you just refer to the notes in their memo of
Okay,
blank and
then
blank date?
third, that, because it's easier for staff if it's all in one place when we make the motion, was
Okay.
my take. The Brunswick School, as a condition of the site approval, shall be required to provide shuttle service between campuses for any special events that may occur at one campus, and use the other for overflow parking in order to prevent pedestrian movements across King Street. Second, Brunswick has obtained local and state health endorsement. And third, the Conservation Department comments that that invasive species be removed. Finally, the ZBA approved this on October 26th and also had conditions, which is what I can't put my hand on right now. One of them was that at least half the students be bused. That the housing units on site be occupied by faculty of the school, and that the effective date of the variance that was granted be the date that the site is acquired by the Brunswick School or in an entity controlled by that school. And I think that's it. Anybody else?
Well, we did get a comment from IWWA. They did confirm there are wetlands on the property, but since
There's no-
nothing is
yeah.
going on near it, then it was given, I guess, a green sheet, or just, they don't want to see it.
Right. Okay.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Did you say aye? I'm sorry.
Just very softly.
Pat, could you get Ann? Where is Andy? Is it-
Oh, here it is. I was gonna say, I thought I saw something.
We're now in the public hearing. Item number 6, 65 Conyers Farm.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. John Hegney for the applicant. We're looking at 65 Conyers Farm Drive, part of the 1983 Conyers Farm subdivision. It was undeveloped until very recently. As you noted in your briefing yesterday, you have seen this property multiple times. Back in November 2008, as part of Final Site Plan 3730 and Special Permit 3731, your predecessors approved a 31,000 square foot house for the property. Our current proposal is much more modest. We're looking for an 11,000 square foot home as shown on the plan. Before coming before you here this evening, we met with both the Inland Wetlands Agency and received their approval. We received approval from the Planning and Architecture Review Committee of Conyers Farms. And we also received the Health Department's approval for our septic system. In going through the staff's comments in the staff report, they did note an area just north of the pool in this area here, which appears to encroach on the 10-foot setback line, denoting the conservation easement area on the property. The conservation easement area was set up with the initial subdivision back in 1983. It did not include a setback requirement. The setback requirement was developed in our review with the Inland Wetlands Agency. Their feeling was that they wanted to keep all construction activities outside of the conservation easement area. A 10-foot buffer was agreed upon because we thought that would be sufficient. They also looked at this area. On the latest version of the plans from DeAndre's office, they note that it is 8.5 feet off of the conservation easement area. And we feel, and as in our discussions with the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency, they agreed that the construction of the wall that's proposed can be done without encroaching into that area. We'd prefer to leave the walls as is. As you can see with the plans that we have developed from Steve Mueller Architects and Conti Landscape Architects, we have a through line that runs through the house, through the pool, to the pool house, which we'd very much like to maintain under the current design, which, in addition to being reviewed by the Wetlands Agency, was also reviewed by the town's Conservation Commission staff, who also noted that they had no objections to the project as proposed. Given the fact that you've seen this property multiple times, that we have met and received approval from all of the departments and agencies that were required to, I have nothing further unless you have any questions.
I do. The zoning enforcement officer gave us a list of 4 or 5 items. I just need to know if some of them I know you can, I mean, just putting certain dimensions on drawings, but are you going to comply with all of those? I think there's 4.
There are 4. The height of the dwelling will comply. In the most recent iteration of the plan, which unfortunately I don't have, we'll be increasing this wall area here, which will increase the grade plane that was submitted with the project. The walls near the driveway entrance can be lowered and to ensure that we comply with the highway department standards. The pool house, when we add in the floor area and the volume we're already over, and that's why we're asking for a special permit. The floor area will be well under, even after the addition of the modest pool house. And the walls.
Isn't there part of a pool house?
We like to maintain the walls at the height that we're proposing, and
Exceed 5 feet.
that's true. In our discussions with the zoning enforcement officer, we've argued that this project is subject to what the case law has listed as the Poirier status, meaning that we would be able to come in and comply with the zoning regulations that applied to the 1983 subdivision. So rather than coming in under your current regulations, we've been working with the 1980 to 1988 regulations that staff provided us.
And he's in agreement with that?
I have a letter that I hope it was included in your staff report, noting that we do comply with that and that he will recognize that as such. I do note that.
I'm just curious why he cited that as an item then, if he's in agreement.
His comments predate our discussion together.
And so,
I don't recall seeing it, so.
I don't recall that either. Do you have a copy you could
I
just
do.
provide the commission? Thank you.
Certainly.
Perfect.
And so that lot has been vacant since 1983. There's been no building on it.
Correct. There was no action
Well-
taken on the 2008 approval.
There's construction that has taken place on it. The foundations have been built.
That is very true. We lose our Poirier status the minute that we convert our foundation-only permit to a full building permit. We've been very careful about pursuing this with the zoning enforcement officer. Our clients were initially intending to pursue a house that would come in under the 150,000 cubic foot threshold. After reviewing that with their architects, they decided that they did not want to be bound by that and said that we would develop the plans that you have before you and led us to filing the special permit. So where our building permit came in under a zoning permit that was issued for a smaller house and not the plans that you have currently.
Did you get a copy of the sign-off?
Yes.
No, I'm just, if you're okay with it.
Yeah, there is that distinction in the statute, as has been pointed out in this memo, about when you can retain the right and when
Correct.
you lose the right. And as you pointed out, it's,
Not too dissimilar to what you were discussing with one of your earlier applications.
well, slightly different because.
Slightly different, but
this is- Yeah, because this, that was a subdivision application, this is a site plan, but we can argue that later.
that's very true. It's similar principles.
Any other comments from the commission?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you've got,
So, I'm just curious, where's the case law? Why is a foundation-only permit not a building permit?
The Poirier case was a case that was settled in Westport. Apparently, the Poirier family used to be very significant developers. They had tried to develop an undeveloped lot in Westport and argued to come in under the zoning regulations that were in effect at the time of their subdivision approval. Obviously, the town at the time had denied their application. They were able to take the case up to the appellate court, at which point the Connecticut legislature decided to enact the provisions of that decision into the state statutes as 8-26A.
Mr. Hagney, in that, in 826A, does it define when you lose that right?
It does.
Okay. I think actually with Mr. Fox's question was, is it states building permit or foundation only permit? How does it state it?
It states in 8-26A B2B, it says a lot shall be deemed vacant until the date at which a building permit is issued with respect thereto and a foundation has been completed in accordance with such building permit.
Just that one.
And so your argument is that the foundation is not completed until you actually get the framing permit?
Correct. The minute that you convert the foundation-only permit to a building permit, it's a very fixed date because you need to provide an as-built survey to the zoning enforcement officer, which provides you with a very clear red line for the zoning enforcement officer to work off of. So it's an excellent standard to use.
That has not been done yet.
Correct.
I'm just sort of curious, what is the differentiation between a foundation permit and a building permit? I mean, a foundation permit is certainly a building permit, issued by the building department of the town, wasn't it?
The building department makes sure that we protects us from ourselves. What they'll do is they'll issue the foundation-only permit to ensure that it's in the right location,
But
which
just stop at that point. Is that not a building permit?
I believe, based on the way that the statute reads, is that they would consider the foundation work not part of the initial not part of the actual building permit, because it clearly specifies that the foundation must be complete. So, meaning that how can you complete the foundation without a foundation-only permit? So you haven't received your building permit.
Well, your foundation permit is your building permit.
Correct, but
In the town of Greenwich, you get all your inspection and all the review of the plans for your complete building.
Mhm.
It is a foundation-only permit till you submit your as-built survey. Your building permit, it's the same number, and it's gone through the review, so I just, it's a really.
The town has, is what Mr. Hegney was noting, the town has made that distinction as it relates to this statute. So this is not, in other words, the first time this is coming up. This is something that the town has established this process and has applied it to other properties previous to this one, for the record.
I think that's true. I think also it's not just a standard that's applied to the town; it is applied all over the state. I know it doesn't happen frequently, but we have had the opportunity to work on 3 different undeveloped lots in town with the zoning enforcement officer this year alone, in which we've applied the Poirier status each time. So this is not something that Mr. Kuchar is unfamiliar with, and it is something that we've had the opportunity to talk about multiple times this year.
Any more comments from the commission?
I was just wondering if you've gotten any comments back from the Conyers Farm Architectural Review. Has that process started? I know that's not part of our scope, I'm just curious.
No, it's not a problem. The Conyers Farm application process has undergone some significant changes recently, I think mostly for the better. They have a much more rigorous process now, and they did issue a decision letter to us on May 25th, outlining the plans that they reviewed and approved as part of our meeting with them. They do take regular meetings, much like your board. Just they don't have as many new buildings going up. It's a smaller community.
It'll meet every 2 weeks?
Their board meets every month and determines whether the architectural review committee should convene or not. So it's on a need to appear basis.
Any comments?
They are looking for professionals willing to lend their expertise on advising on new projects, Mr. Malin.
You mean you don't have to live there?
They do hire outside consultants.
They provide housing?
Well, if this project gets approved, there's going to be this really nice pool house over at 65 Conyers Farm Drive.
No kitchen, though, right?
We'll be sure that there is no kitchen in there
That's all
in
right.
accordance with the town zoning regulations.
The RV, I'll park there, we'll have the kitchen in it, so I'll be okay. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, close it? Sure. Close it? It's closed.
Thank you very much.
Item number 8, St. Barnabas Church.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Larry Liebman from Messing Minor. As directed at the last meeting, we went back to ARC. ARC has approved, and you have, I hope you have the approval. Everything else, this is, if you recall, this is a 425 square foot vestibule addition to an existing structure that is in excess of 150,000 cubic feet. That's my presentation.
Comments from the commission? Any comments from the public? In and out. It's closed.
Thank you, sir.
All right, now we're going to have.
We're saving it up for you, Bruce.
Well, yes. Okay.
We're ready to go if you are. Item number 8.
Good evening, Mr. Maitland, members of the commission. Bruce Cohen representing the applicant in connection with this final coastal site plan and special permit approval. But before I begin, I note that one of the staff comments related to the applicability of the new versus the old R6 regulations, and I'm wondering, unless you've already determined that we can continue to operate under the regulations that applied when we began this process, I'll be glad to make a presentation.
I'm going to say that the regulations that applied and that were in effect at the time you appeared before the Zoning Board of Appeals applies.
Thank you. If that is the view of the commission, I'll continue to avoid that issue completely.
That's a good point.
This application, as you will remember, was to demolish and replace the building that is housing a multifamily occupancy immediately adjacent to and north of the Indian Harbor Yacht Club on Steamboat Road in Greenwich. The proposal is for 702-708 Steamboat Road. The commission heard this back in April of last year and approved it. Approved in the sense that we were advised to proceed to final. And with the letter of move to final, there were 14 conditions attached to it. And we, our clients and their consultants, have spent a good deal of that time in satisfying those conditions. Tonight with me are 3 of those consultants, Tony DeAndrea, who's a civil engineer, representative from Roberge Coastal Engineers, who has worked with Deep on this, and Eric Slinch from Robert A.M. Stern's office, the project architect. I wonder if I could ask, Mr. Chairman, that the record that was before the commission at the time of our preliminary hearings be incorporated in this record. Quickly to talk about the area, as I said, immediately south of us is the Indian Harbor Yacht Club. To the north is another multi-family residence, and further up Steamboat Road, there are office buildings and other multifamily buildings. On the east side of Steamboat Road are generally single, at least in this part of Steamboat Road, are single-family residences. The property itself was built in the 19th century. It was originally a hotel. It was converted to multifamily use. There are right now apartments for 29 residents in this building, and that it is, as you will remember, non-conforming in many respects. Going through to give you an idea of what the existing building looks like, Here is a photograph showing the front view on the left, which is the view taken from Steamboat Road. And on the right is a view taken from Greenwich Harbor showing the rear of the building. The plans that were finally reviewed and approved by ARC related to the construction shown on this, on this board, which has brought, as you can see, the building out of the velocity zone and at an elevation that now satisfies 6-139.1. The front of the building will end up looking like the image on the top, which is a colored version of the elevations that ARC approved, and the rear of the building will end up looking like the image at the bottom. In the course of, and the building itself will now entirely, with one exception, completely conform to zoning. It will conform to the flood hazard zone regulations, and it will be deficient in only one area, which was a variance granted by the Board of Appeals, and that was for density. In other words, the Board of Appeals allowed 8 units to be constructed within this building rather than the 6 that would be permitted, and certainly lots and lots less than the 29 that are there right now. So the main issue that I think is before the commission tonight has to do with the fact that we now are replacing a highly non-conforming building, and really dangerous in many ways because it's been subject to flooding and flood damage over the years, and replacing it with a building that is not only completely conforming, but now it meets all modern building and fire safety codes. The consultants that I mentioned are here to answer any questions, and I'll be glad to answer as well.
Did we get a sign-off on this from DEEP, from Mr. Goucher?
You did.
Because there is we did?
I believe you did. I saw
I couldn't find it,
an email from him dated April 20th, 2017.
April 20th one says something to the effect that he's going to discuss or some modifications with Tony DeAndrea about the proposed drainage system. Is that?
Tony advises me that request from Mr. Goucher has been observed.
Did we get it? We didn't get an update from him on the.
No.
Okay. The other thing I noticed in reading that section of stuff, which was with DEEP, and had to do, I think, with, because you're right on the line with the VE zone, with the foundation wall for the garage and so forth, and I think they were somewhat concerned, or at least I read in there a concern regarding getting over the line a little bit or making sure that the foundation is adequately braced against any kind of action that could be in the VE zone, since you're right on it, and that you're not going to be undermining in any way, not her words, mine, undermining the foundation in any way, since you're so close.
Well,
Are you on piles? Let me ask that as a first question.
Tony says we're on ledge.
You tie into the, I mean, I'm just sort of curious, how do you answer that question that they had? You'll have to
Hold
come
on
up.
a second. The young lady who's about to address you is Jill Santo Pietro from Roberge.
Yes, so the building's going to be a zone compliant foundation, and I believe the comment you're talking about from DEEP was that they wanted us to take care that the building remain in the A zone.
But you're right on the line, and if it is, that my question would be, if it's any kind of a spread footing or anything like that, you're going to be into the VE zone.
Well,
So
the
are you
entire
anchoring it with the? How are you anchoring it?
Tony DeAndrea. I'm not the structural engineer in this project, but we've been dealing with them and the architects all throughout this project to make it understood that they have to tie everything together. So the front of the building is certainly in ledge, and the walls will all be, what's the word?
Pinned?
Pinned in the front for sure, but they're going to be on ledge.
When you say front, to me, front is Steamboat.
Front is Steamboat. So
I'm worried about back.
I understand. So what I'm trying to say is all this is the foundation. The foundation for the majority of the building is inside. The outside foundation wall is all tied together as one big rectangle. I can show it to you better on mine.
Okay, is the foundation wall itself back from the VE zone? What is that?
I think probably the better person to address this is the architect. This is Eric Solange from Stern's office.
See, you're right. Okay, that wall. Now, what's the other wall in front of it? Is that just a retain? In other words,
The outside wall, Mr. Maitland, is the last vestige of our grade plane at 5 feet high. That's our westernmost wall.
So it will disappear?
And that will, no, it won't disappear because it's also tied into the foundation, as Eric will describe. But
Okay.
that's the limit of the foundation for the main structure. And this is an extra wall that'll be designed to tie into that, I'm sure.
You could tell me almost anything and I would accept it because I don't know. I'm just kind of reacting to her comments in this thing and whether it's going to be then still VE zone compliant.
Sure. So Eric Silling from Robert Stern Architects. This outside line is, these two walls represent the two setbacks for zoning to go 5 feet up and then set back to go 5 feet up further again. These two walls are connected with a slab in between them. So they act in conjunction. Now, I'm not a structural engineer, so the particulars of it I'm not familiar with, but the section of it I've drawn many times. These two walls are connected with rebar and cast-in-place concrete. How it sits in the ledge and whether it's anchored, but it's all tied in at the corners here. Literally, the whole foundation would have to pull out for this to shift out into the further zone.
I ask you.
I think
is the
that
building
addresses
on
the question.
piles? Is the bu-
I don't believe the building is on piles. You would do piles when you have a different type of subgrade condition where you need to have friction bearing down and at depth. There's a stone, exposed stone ledge right in front here, and my understanding is that it comes out here. So this is going to sit on, I think it's granite, on sort of live rock, as it were. But the piles would keep it from sliding out. But the fact that this whole foundation is tied in together, and this is a transfer slab, this whole
When it
slab is
goes,
coming
the whole
across.
thing will go.
Literally, this whole building would have to pull out,
As long as what you're doing is compliant with their standards, that's,
and we can provide additional documentation, obviously, but
as long as she's happy.
We hope she's happy. Is there anything else that you'll believe anybody? I'll try it.
How about the business, what regulations enforce?
You're
No,
down to
I'm
hear me on
kidding.
that, or?
No.
Oh, good.
Mr. Cohn, the pumping of the water out of the garage, how would that work? Can you just describe that again? So there's no,
Gravity to daylight.
I'm thinking, okay, so how? Through the back?
The garage has been designed with a slope to the, now we're looking south on the bottom of the page, and the elevations are set so that the water drains out of the garage and then over the curb once we vacate. We also have all the because we have to have on two walls. We have all these flood vents. These are the darkened areas.
Perfect,
And we went through many
Iterations of that.
iterations of that with DEP. And to answer your specific question about responding to DEP, we had, again, several conversations with DEP and Scott together. And we agreed that what John Goucher wanted was just to pull the level spreader farther away from the seawall that's there. They didn't want to have any more treatment in the peninsulas, if you will, because they're constantly inundated. So we left it to very small amount of driveway, all discharged through a deep and wide
It's a
level spreader.
right?
Yes.
Right. Is there any work being done on the seawall itself? I think there is.
There's a comment that, that is new and that Deep has.
Steel sheeting.
I think.
the seawall will be rebuilt.
And did you get the certificate
comments?
of permission?
Yeah, did you get comments back from Deep on that? Because my understanding from the staff report was that you did not have that yet.
Seawall, Jill?
Yes. So that's correct. That's correct. We haven't gotten a COP for the seawall yet, but we are working on that with Deep currently.
The seawall's in the same location,
Yes.
and it's just being torn out and replaced with piles, or sheeting.
So we're still performing a geotechnical investigation to ensure that we could drive steel sheeting, but that's the plan is to oversheet the existing seawall.
Right.
So that's a hang-up.
Well, I don't know.
I mean, considering that the seawall is already there, so it's not a question of whether or not the seawall is being replaced, per se. It's a question of
Well, it's-
how, I'm just wondering the likelihood of this getting approved through Deep. It seems to me that since the seawall is already there, it's just a matter of how you're going to be doing the replacement as opposed to,
As Jill said, it's being done under a certificate of permission rather than a permit, so it's considered to be a repair.
right,
So can
I think so.
we, okay. And then the last one was the conservation comments, native species.
I noticed that. We'll meet with Alexandra and see if we can satisfy her point on the additional native species. Regarding her issue about treatment of stormwater runoff, she's wrong about that.
Well, we're kind of what we're trying to do with that is unless we really feel like she's asking for an important extra, we're letting DPW call that one.
And they've approved
And
this.
so they've called it, because otherwise we get caught between the two.
Yeah, but you should understand that there is no treatment now, and there's a good deal that will be added.
So she's looking for more lid, and we want more treatment, but the DPW is not requiring it, so we're caught in between. We'd love to see people do it. Okay.
Mr. Cohen, can you describe the landscaping in the front yard? And what I'm getting at with that question is how it screens the parking?
Great idea.
You know, this is kind of interesting because
ARC.
what screens the parking is the 4-foot wall. And oddly enough, in its decision of May 3rd, 2016, this commission made a finding, whereas the commission finds the parking in the front yard is adequately screened by the landscaping wall. And so I assume that that's a finding that you want to stand by, because the wall is the same nice stone 4-foot wall.
Under the advisory review, the preliminary?
Pardon me?
You were referring to the preliminary letter?
Yeah.
The advisory comments?
Well-
No, I'm not saying it's changed, I'm just saying that that's a finding of
Finding, you may.
guidance to the
say it
applicant
wasn't
under
a
the preliminary.
non-binding finding, but that,
Yeah.
I have nothing to add to that.
That's fine, it was just a question, thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? No. Any comments from the public?
Thank you.
Believe it or not, it's closed.
I believe it.
Jill and Eric, would you mind just giving me your last names over here? You can write it down.
Item number 10, Mill Pond Realty. What did I say? Oh, Mill Post.
Well, but we
Mill
have
Post.
I know we have a Mill Pond.
There is a Mill Pond.
Where have you been?
That's the Mill Pond Shopping Center.
Yeah, and Mill Pond is on our Costco brains.
There you go. I don't know. Wait?
Huh?
Should I wait?
Nah. We'll
Okay.
try
Okay.
to go right over them.
Okay, no problem. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, John Tessie representing the applicant, Mill Post Realty LLC, in connection with my client's proposal to amend Section 6103.1B of the Building Zone Regulations. The application is described in my letter to the application's coordinator, and it's also, I think, well described in Mr. LaRose's staff report. And I know that you all had a discussion during your staff briefing yesterday regarding the application. I can certainly take you all through it in some degree of depth, or I could really answer any questions that you may have, since you seem to be on a roll here to do something unusual.
Let's find out.
Okay.
Let's find out. Any questions from the commission?
The one question we were having yesterday was the overall impact. Oh, sorry, in the zone. And how many parcels would be subject to this? Is this spot zoning kind of thing?
Is it spots? is it
Well, how many
spot zoning?
parcels are going to be impacted
Did you?
in the zone?
Was there a study done when you changed the regulations in 2010 as to how many parcels were affected by the change that eliminated the use?
We tend to always look at the number of parcels that will be
Because
affected.
every parcel.
Katie always does that. She looks at.
Yeah,
the
I'm just saying, because those would be the same parcels. That's
Well,
why I asked.
Well, let's, I mean, just to, let me dive down a little bit deeper into the question here, because it would affect every parcel in the CGBR zone, where every parcel could have the option. Am I right on that?
No.
So,
Well, I was being a little facetious, but seriously.
Why wouldn't it affect every parcel?
Well, I'll
in the
explain to
C-
you why.
Okay.
Because of the change you made in 2010. Because you not only eliminated this use from the first floor, these uses, recreational type of uses, from the first floor in the basement, which is easy enough slash, but you also stated, however, you will allow the use on the second floor, but only in those cases where adequate parking can be provided.
Right.
And when you do that, you knock out the vast majority of the properties in the CGBR zone, because they simply don't have any parking, relatively small parcels. So we're really dealing, as you were when you allowed the second floor use, to a limited number of properties that can satisfy this condition. I presume, having been around a little bit, that your concern was that even if we were going to allow it on that second floor, we didn't want to place a use in there that may get, lack of a better phrase, out of control, because we have no parking requirements whatsoever for all the use group 1 uses, and you could get perhaps a use with which would require ordinarily another zone way more parking spaces than the number that would be required for a classic retail use. And I get that. I think you're going to have to make some decisions down the line with the whole change of really the way people shop, or the way the next generation is shopping, and what that means to our central areas, being obviously primarily Greenwich Avenue, and then your
Talked about that yesterday.
Yeah, but-
We raised that yesterday
Right.
as, how do you manage this? Because is this part of how people are going to use a downtown in the future more and
I
more?
think-
But
I
we
think
need to
this is a
study
subject,
that.
this is a subject, I'm sure, that will come up in the PLC.
That's a broader view. There's
Yeah.
a broader view, and there's a broader concern, whether it's a bank or whether it's this use, any other type of uses that have been zoned out, or maybe weren't allowed to begin with.
What's going to happen to the way people use their downtowns? And to
Yeah,
Richard's
right,
point,
right.
when we talked about it yesterday, that was kind of the thing. That's a broader picture issue.
Very
That-
complex issue. Do you?
For the POC, I mean,
yeah.
'cause, yeah, we,
Loosening up the liquor regulation, it's a whole panoply you have to look at. You have a lot,
Right.
it's a big task, and it's necessary for this town. Getting back to this simple little task here, it's basically doing, it doesn't really affect much of any properties. Very few properties would be affected by it because they don't have the means of providing the parking. And those properties, you can count on, we can all figure out on Greenwich Avenue the 5 or 6 that are large enough, but most of them don't even have basements or are already committed to existing tenants. This, I'm here on behalf of a specific property with a very unique construct, meaning our first floor retail on East Putnam Avenue, and then the drive around the rear and the drop down to a basement area that's been problematic to rent to classic retailers over the last few years particularly. And we do have a ton of parking on the site.
Any other comments from the commission?
And because the way the grades work, those basement areas are actually exposed on the rear side.
They are exposed. For the most part, however, they're actually ancillary spaces for the
Right.
uses on the first floor right now.
Right.
The client just simply can't get a tenant. I mean, technically, under our sign regulations, you can't even get a sign up on East Putnam Avenue to tell people who happen to be walking by or driving by that there's actually a use in the rear. So it's been very difficult for them, and this is just kind of like, twisting the knife in the back or salt in the wound. Just made it difficult. And that is a type of area that I think that, interestingly, given your concern about the recreational uses, you really would probably have no problem with conceptually, just because of the site. You've got the parking. It's not affecting the shopping area. But you have to look at the broad zone, as certainly you said, Ms. Albin, and I'm saying when you look at it, when you put that caveat of having to provide parking, you've really constricted the number of potential properties where this use would be. And I don't think it's a bad use. I think the use actually fosters bringing people to the avenue, which is really part of the PCOD, and that you really want to find means to get people to the avenue to shop, dine, whatever. And this type of use, as we all know, does bring out people.
Yeah, I think, as we talked about it yesterday, it's the type of facility it ends up being, because you don't want it to be so comprehensive that people don't come out and then use the shopping area, have pedestrian reasons. In other words, you don't want to have it also be a spa, also have a lunch. You don't want to have, on the avenue, you wouldn't want to have something so big that all you'd have to do is go in and come out.
One-stop type of shopping thing. Well, people tend, I don't know enough.
That's just for, when we do the POCD, come noodle with it. I think that's when we need to noodle how you would use it, but.
I think what you're seeing right now in Greenwich Avenue, and I think you see more and more of it, is people do want to go out. They're not going to hide in their rooms on their computers. They want to go enjoy. I think probably in the future you're going to see more galleries. I think you're going to see more of a socialization, and you have to decide whether you've got parameters broad enough to allow all that.
Exactly.
Yeah, under the regs.
Of what people are now looking for when they go to a downtown. They're looking for something.
Exactly.
different. And
Yeah.
what is it that they're
More
looking for?
events, more, anyway, I can go on and on.
Yeah, no.
Not
Okay.
tonight.
Just don't go away, come back for the POCD.
I will.
Any other comments from the commission?
No, that was all we had.
Any comments from the public?
Thank you.
We'll close it.
Thanks. Now we have to review all these decision letters later.
You just can't be satisfied, can you?
No.
Item number 11. Flouty? Is that pronounced correctly?
Flutie.
Flutie. Thank you. Family Limited Partnership.
Excited for this very calm environment tonight. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Casey O'Donnell on behalf of the applicant, Flutie Family Limited Partnership. This application is for site plan and special approval for 5 units in the R6 zone, as well as for cubic volume of 150,000 square feet or more, which we anticipate and will make a study as you require. So I'll start just with some brief background and then try to get to your specific inquiries if you have them. R6 zone, no flood zone, no CAM zone. The underlying neighborhood is a mix of residential uses. I handed out a 100-to-1 scale GIS map with some of the photographs I gave you. You'll note that Talbot Lane, the first 2 pages of the photo pack are a 1934 aerial and the 1965 aerial. The reason I included those documents is I wanted to give you some flavor for the history of this specific area. When they created the turnpike, I-95, it significantly changed this neighborhood. And it sort of turned and cut the end off Delavan Avenue as far as the residences there existed, as well as Talbot Lane. Now, Talbot Lane appears to always have been deficient in terms of right-of-way, but the change in the lot lines and the takings by the state created a condition where the first portion of Talbot Lane has a very generous right-of-way, and it necks down to about 22 feet at the western boundary of our property. So generally, Talbot Lane is developed really, again, it's one of the great things about Greenwich is you have this mix of development that could be as far back as, prior to 1934 to relatively recent structures going up through the 80s. It's a mix of single and 2-family. Talbot Lane itself, again, primarily residential. There is, you can see a row of townhouses to the north and sort of a back lot. That's a mixture of, I think, 4 and 8 unit townhouse type development. The overall neighborhood, Byram well, is a mix of single family, 2-family, multifamily, and commercial uses. The end of Talbot Lane actually butts right up against the GB zone. And then the other end, of course, I-95. So the 2 parcels, this application would include the consolidation of 38 Talbot Lane and 40 Talbot Lane to one single parcel. That parcel would have 125 feet of frontage on Talbot Lane, and it would have 23,294 square feet, so just over half an acre. 38 Talbot Lane existing conditions. It contains a single-family dwelling. I'm moving to Earth Image existing conditions survey. The top of the drawing represents the north. That front lot is 38 Talbot Lane. That dwelling appears to have been constructed in 1910. It's non-conforming as to rear yard setbacks. It's approximately 4 feet off the rear yard, but it does appear to be conforming in terms of front yard setbacks, even when you consider the deficient right-of-way. Looking at the GIS map, and we'll get to this, most of the structures appear to have non-conforming front yards on the basis of the deficient right-of-way or otherwise. Secondly, 38 Talbot Lane contains a garage. The garage is non-conforming as to rear yards. It appears to encroach on 40 Talbot Lane to the south by about 0.3 of a foot. 40 Talbot Lane also contains a single-family dwelling and a detached garage, as well as a shed. 40 Talbot Lane, we don't know when the house was actually constructed, but our understanding is that in 1958, this structure was moved from Delavan Avenue up the hill to become a backlot behind 365 Delavan Avenue.
Could you just quickly point to those, what the numbers are, you use them?
I'm sorry. Oops. Forgive me. The parcel to the north is 38 Talbot Lane.
Thank you.
The access way from Talbot Lane, that's on the east side of the property, it's approximately 25 feet wide, continues south for approximately 160 feet. About 85 feet is the approximate depth of the front lot, the northern lot, which is 38 Talbot Lane. In terms of grading, Talbot Lane, relatively level street. You kind of come up a mild grade to get here, and then it levels out. 38 Talbot Lane, generally very gentle topography. In the northwest quadrant, there is a highest elevation. It's about 5.5 feet above the street level. As you continue south, once you get to about 100 feet, the topography becomes more pronounced, and it drops over the next 100 feet to the south, approximately 12 feet in elevation. So, and we'll discuss this a bit more. The owner, the Flutie Family Partnership, they attempted to work with the existing grades, and based on some early staff input, they also made some changes to these plans. So these are different than what we submitted originally. And while we're on the subject of the general neighborhood character, in the upper left-hand corner of drawing SD3, that represents the front street face of the proposed combined lot. You can see that it's 2.5 stories, and the top story is proposed to be completely trussed. But its attempt to be modest and match what we're seeing in the neighborhood.
How many two families are on that street?
I have not made a density analysis, but I'll note to do so.
Because looking at Google Earth, it doesn't look like there are any.
Okay, I'll investigate that and come back with a definitive answer.
Mr. O'Donnell, what's the overall width of that facade?
Looks like it's about 70 feet.
70 feet, thank you.
Okay. Parcels are served with electricity, water, sewer, gas. The front structure, as we talked about, is proposed to be 2-story with the trussed attic space, and it works with the existing topography again, so we did not create too much loom. At least one of those pictures, I think on the last page, I try to give you some flavor for the existing bulk of the structures on the property. To the property, looking at the landscape diagram, the top of the drawing represents the east. The side here that's marked Talbot Lane represents the north. So to the east, there's a relatively recently constructed single-family dwelling. It's a significant structure in the street. It is set back from the street because of the shape of the existing right-of-way. And then moving west where you have those other structures. So there's some smaller 1.5 and 2.5 story structures there. But again, some of them are moved a bit closer to the street. And there's a brown one, I think, pictured that kind of shows as more significant. Generally, this plan, it conforms to all the bulk regulations under the zoning code, taking exception to the front yard setback. As I alluded to, on the basis that Talbot Lane necks down from well over 50 feet to 22 feet at the western boundary line, we'd like your approval to seek a variance for that. We have submitted a variance application, and we are on the agenda to potentially be heard Wednesday, September 27th. So we're asking for the Board of Appeals, with your approval, for a 23-foot front yard to a portico, and then that extends 3 feet off the front wall of the house, which would be 26 feet. I'll note that that is going to be a little further in terms it'll have more setback than the property immediately to the west, and it'll have less setback as it appears from the street line from the new single-family structure to the east, but I think the line sort of creates a medium that works well visually, where it's not starkly set too far back or pulled too far forward and imposing. So each of the 5 units contain 3 bedrooms. The 2-family units contain 1 parking space at the front buildings. The 3-family units in the rear each have 2 parking spaces. It's a total of 8 indoor and 5 outdoor spaces for 13. Access is currently proposed by 2 driveways. We're aware of the DPW comments regarding the site access, and Jim Casitas, our engineer, has a meeting with Scott tomorrow to discuss alternatives. We were also hopeful if this commission had input.
I'm sorry, when you say 2, what are the 2?
I think they show up best on the proposed site plan ZL2 by Earth Image. Again, on this,
You're not planning on using the other one. I mean, you got retaining walls in it.
so this, just again, looking at drawing ZL2, the northern boundary of the property is Talbot Lane.
Right.
There is a proposed access way here that would lead to the rear units. And at the front access way, we have a double driveway
Oh, I'm sorry.
and back out area.
Okay.
So again, the grading here works pretty well. And I'm sorry that that's not clear, and I know that you haven't had a long time to look at these.
Gotcha.
So again, if there's input from this commission, we'd be happy to consider that where we're exploring our alternatives with Scott to respond to the engineering comments.
Well, you may or may not be happy to hear it, but
I'm always happy to hear your input.
number one,
Yes, sir.
the layout, I find there's no space between the two buildings, and the rear yard of the two buildings in the front is faced by an entranceway that you have on the 3-unit building, which has to use their quote backyard for the entrance into that building. Number one, makes no sense. Number two, it's very close. At its closest point, it's only 9 feet away. I don't think it's just not an appropriate separation between these two buildings, in my opinion. That's one. Two, the tail on this lot does not support being included in lot area because it doesn't have the 50-foot necessary for the two side yards. The tail, the piece going to the south.
So I appreciate that perspective and will consider it. It does, however, it's at least 20 feet, which exceeds the required yards for the R6 zone.
I'm sorry, this is the R6 zone, which is 25 feet for multifamily in the R6 zone. So it doesn't comply.
Okay.
So you
The next thing is, on the 3-unit building,
can't have it both ways.
on the 3-unit building, when you've done the grade plane calculation and you come up with the weighted first floor average.
That's an
have you-
error. And just flat out, I'll acknowledge that. I talked to the engineer tonight. There's no reason to have a first floor average on it doesn't work. I don't know.
Well, not only it doesn't work, but you were using the garage and it had it had a floor above it. You can't.
I pointed it out to the surveyor this night, and I agree. I'm impressed that you found it on the small scale drawings in a small amount of time. It's wrong.
Oh, yeah, we're always impressed with him.
So in other words, you couldn't slip it by.
No, I quite frankly, I noticed it tonight. I talked to Mr. Finkbeiner. He recognized the problem with it. We agreed that it was a 3-story structure as proposed. We consider it on story check and see if there's any changes that would be appropriate, but it still works with the zoning. Even
It may well work with the zoning. Where it may or may not work with the zoning is that what you submitted was a grade plane less than 3 feet to that floor because of the miscalculation, let's say, of the weighted first floor. You'll now be going to somewhere between 3 and 5, and depending on what that number ends up being, it may or may not have an effect. It will certainly have some effect because you'll at least be counting 50%.
the bulk analysis table that I provided you this evening, it does consider full floor area for the first floor, and so it works from a building perspective. It works
But
from
the only thing wrong with this, of course, is that you've counted that tail in there as part of your lot area, and you can't.
Just in case this came up, I knew that it was an area of some debate, or at least only to me it is. I did make the calculations. The bulk regulations work, taking exceptions to lot coverage, which becomes non-conforming. The patios represent about 730 feet, so if we remove the patios, it becomes conforming. We're going to consider.
That's something you're going to
Sure.
have to do, but I mean, when it comes back to us, that has to be removed from your lot area for FAR calculations, green area, et cetera, et cetera.
It will be.
Okay. At least the drawings that we looked at end up having on the south part of the site a very steep slope, a 1-on-2 slope. And that's a tough one to stabilize, and therefore, I think I really hope that you come back well, you've got to solve the first problem that I mentioned tonight, was the closeness of those two buildings. It doesn't work at any level.
Well, I think you should review it with the fire marshal, too, for access. I'm concerned about the neighborhood and access and a lot of structure on a
Well,
relatively.
for one thing, you'd never even be able to get a fire, I mean, you could get no fire apparatus through there because there's that curved wall and there's a retaining wall. And even that, there was no elevations on that retaining wall, so there's no way to know whether it's in compliance or not.
Well, that's why I suggest he sits down with the fire
Yeah.
marshal and review this.
May I suggest, Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes, sir.
talk to your development team. Ask them if it's 5 units or 4.
Okay.
4, if you eliminate 1 unit, you get a better spread in between the two buildings. And you might be able to do something about getting what you have given me as a 70-foot wide facade farther off the street. You gave me photographs of single-family residences. I don't see any of them that are 70 feet wide on the street.
I mean, keeping in mind directly to the north, there's 8-unit buildings.
Yeah, and they're set back and they're not on Talbot Lane. They're actually on their own private drive and their own private little association, so.
Fair enough.
If you eliminate one of the buildings, this may give you a lot more wiggle room to make this a really successful development.
Can I ask you a really stupid question that I meant to ask you yesterday, Nick? There's enough land under the old regs to do 5 units. In other words, land per unit. Is there not just, is there a way that one could keep 5 units, but just lay it out better?
Sure, make the 5 units smaller.
And not make them as, 'cause I guess, well,
Like the man said.
yeah, because it's 8,000 feet for 3 unit, 8,000 square feet for 3 units, and 4,000, so 2,000 square foot each and 2.5. So you're saying make it smaller than that, and then you could, so that would be the trade-off. Okay.
I think what Nick is referring to is, I think in line with what I was saying, the site doesn't, it's just crowded. It's too
Right,
crowded
'cause you're-
with those units. If there's a way to redo it and I mean, that's up to you. But what we have now is not acceptable.
Trying to get 7 pounds into the 5-pound bag.
There you go, that's my line, by the way. I
Sorry.
charge when you use it.
Okay.
Would you?
We kind of got away from the steep grades.
Right.
So I don't think we have an answer
But I
to
have it
that yet.
noted.
Okay. If you're going to maintain them, I think you need to give us some way that you're going to stabilize that grade and have it stay there and not run down the hill into somebody else's yard. The plans, there needs to be a clarification on the plans between the outside grade and the inside grade, and it's very hard to find them. So you don't know how many steps are going to have to be placed in the fronts of these buildings to get in.
So we'll
A
get
few times I tried to figure it out. I didn't see that kind of land being devoted to the stairway for the units.
So we'll get the
Primarily
grade
the-
plane on the elevation as well as taking your advice and analyze it.
But show how the stairs work.
Yeah, but the
both
stairs
on
are-
the elevations and on the site plan, because you may have a very large stairwell or stair set that's
Right.
poking out into your driveways.
Okay, thank you.
Have you gone to ARC?
No, we're on, proposed to visit ARC on October 4th. Just to review the timing, if you would indulge me on this application, we could see ZBA on September 27th, and if we needed to return to them, we could return to them October 11th. We could visit ARC on October 4th. If staff found room on the agenda, again, we could return to ARC November 8th. We could return to you October 17th to vet some of our concepts and identify remaining issues, and then finally return to you November 9th. So we can see everybody twice. and we can make some adjustments.
Would be careful about assuming your timeline. I think you should go back and actually look at the issues that we've raised here to make sure that your design doesn't completely change, or if you find a better solution. If you find a better solution and things are working out, it would be that much easier, but if it takes you another month or two to do that, you should take the month.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Did you see sewer comments?
No, not yet. Thank you.
Well, we also have DPW as a resubmit on it too, so.
Yep. But they sent new stuff to DPW, and as I understand. I think
They didn't have time to review it.
Yeah, I think somewhere.
I don't.
No, that was
no,
sewers.
That was
That was
somebody
sewer.
else, sewer.
Sewer
that we
did not
get a
receive any
comment.
No,
Any
this was
information.
just revised and sent to DPW engineering. Page 483,
Okay.
number 5, drainage report. So, is that right?
No, I'm just saying, we don't have anything back from DPW.
Right, because the
That's my
9/11 one
point.
is outdated now, right? He's not listening, but I think they've revised
Nine-
since, right.
Well, whatever, we don't
Correct.
have it, so
Right.
the fact is,
Yeah, DPW hasn't come back to you yet. Okay.
We went in public?
yeah, if we're done, do we have any more,
No, I guess.
any more questions from the commission?
So the only thing that I would, if I can just check with our engineers here, and I'd like him to maybe, at the speed of light, discuss our drainage to make sure you're comfortable with it structurally and/or slope stabilization. Either I see Mr. Fox is not interested in
Well,
drainage.
because staff, we haven't gotten staff's updated report, and I
Yeah.
just don't.
Whatever we say, we're overruled by if Scott
We don't
disagrees
want
with
to
us.
Okay.
this, we don't want to overrule.
Yeah.
Adequate information to respond? Do you have any specific inquiries while you have the commission's attention?
Did you mention the thing about the lot of the tail area?
Yeah.
Okay.
5 times.
Okay. I'm just going through my list and I couldn't
What was the
remember.
5-time?
Nothing.
I was
It was just,
answering,
I'm going
Ms.
through my
Albin's
notes from the
comment.
briefing and making sure we covered.
Well, if it was a 5-time note, I want to write it down at least 7 times.
And we mentioned the land, well, you're going to ARC, so you're going to
Yeah, so
have
I
to
will
have
do that.
landscape. Okay.
Correct. Oh, we
10-1.
do have a landscape plan?
I know, but we haven't seen it, so,
Right.
Talk to ARC, but because I think they may say the same thing about the building configuration to you.
so if they don't, it's irrelevant, we said it.
We've said it.
Do you object, by the way, to, right now, we have proposed backout spaces in the front yard. Most of this neighborhood, all the parking is in directly off the street. It may give us some flexibility in site design if we can utilize the backout spaces as parking spaces. Is that something that the commission would be amenable to with appropriate screening?
The problem is, at that area, Talbot narrows down to
22 feet.
a real small area.
Correct, at the
and I
western
don't-
border.
I really don't want to encourage any more back out into Talbot in a narrow area. I mean, I'm really uncomfortable, when you look at it and visit it, how narrow Talbot Lane is, and I surely am not supportive of adding any more back out spaces to Talbot.
Okay.
Anything else?
Presumably, we can circle back around after the public comment, but I think we need to talk about timing of everything.
Well, why don't we hear the public
Sure.
comment, then we'll talk about scheduling.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public? Yes. Come
You
up.
just have, sorry.
Give your name.
Hi, I'm George Sihojos, and I
And
live
then you
on
may have to spell it for the,
Pipe, maybe?
Psyhojos. I live on Talbot Lane, and think to answer a question you had earlier, the number of two-family homes, to my knowledge, on Talbot Lane stand at 3. I own one of them. We have some other people here that own some other multifamily homes. First of all, I'm all for combining this and improving the neighborhood. If you look at the current 2 homes, they're in disarray, the bushes are overgrown, look horrible. However, I think putting 5 homes is really tight. Parking is a major issue on that street, and in particular, the points you've already raised, 22 feet wide of the road, it gets really tight. The bushes are overgrown, and we've had cars come down and clip mirrors. And to the point, trying to get a fire truck down there or ambulance, it's ridiculous. And even snowplow, trying to get a snowplow down there, and God forbid if any parks on the street during the snowstorm, the plow doesn't come down at all. So if you look at the current houses today, the way they're set back, the one in closer towards 95 down the long driveway, they use that access road as pretty much a long driveway. So when there's parties, you can park 10, 12 cars on that street. I'm concerned with when you start turning this into multifamily housing, the lack of parking that you're going to have. As it stands right now, parking on the street at times is boiling over. The police are coming down there more and more frequently. People illegally parking, blocking people's driveways. You can't get out. And several times the cops have been down there. So it's really a boiling point for parking. And I think the tight density on the 5 homes is way too much. And, you're talking about the grade, and the current person who owns the property has been trying to solve that by dumping some soil on the property over the last few months as well. But I'm for at least, combining some of these units and making them look better.
They should not be doing anything. I thought once they'd filed a permit, they're not permitted to do work on the land, or are they?
That's only on subdivision regulations.
It's only subdivision? Okay.
So I think that's all I have, but I think other folks, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? You have to come up to the microphone, please.
Yeah, I'm in the neighborhood, and I don't remember what's there, but I've never driven down this.
My name is Carl Pranat. I live in the condominiums right adjacent to this new proposal. And the architecture aside, I agree with the gentleman just before me. It is really congested there. It's like 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. And there is only one-way traffic in or out of Talbot Lane, one car at a time, that is. So the congestion of having more cars on the property with more people visiting and so forth, just amplifies the problem.
Okay. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm gonna go look.
Good evening. Should I wait to give my name?
Yeah, because he's taking out of the gentleman's name.
Yeah, okay. My name is Mike Cuny. I'm the owner of 34 Talbot Lane, which is the property directly west of the proposed units. In addition to what the two gentlemen previously had stated about issues with parking, I also just want to state that the apartments, the apartment complex that is I think the 8 unit complex that was stated, the overflow parking for that falls into Talbot Lane. There is no additional visitor parking there. Well, there's some visitor parking, but we actually get spillover. So I think that exacerbates the right-of-way problem that we have on the street. Also just want to express that my hope in terms of any kind of construction is that whatever green space that is in the street is preserved to the extent possible, because in Byram it just seems like it's dwindling down, and the space that's proposed in front seems like the green space is going to be more or less gone with parking spots, and that would be a shame considering just considering the look and feel of the neighborhood. And I know that there are some that have no green space, but it would be great if we could try and preserve that. And lastly, privacy. So selfishly for me, we have about an 8-foot green wall in between our two properties. There's about massive shrub that spans the yard line for us and as a family.
Is that on your property or on theirs?
It's on theirs.
Okay, so one of the things we should ask is for that to be preserved?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, please.
With your comment on that, though, that what is, it comes over the fence or something, or?
So right now, there's a chain link fence that spans the property line. To my knowledge, it's on their property, on their side of the property. But overgrown from that chain link fence on their side is a massive hedge that, I mean, my estimates is about 8 feet high, and it goes back to almost the end of our property.
Because you're at 34, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So it goes back to
I see it.
the shed, or where the garage starts.
Yep.
And then the garage essentially keeps our privacy, which is nice. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anyone else?
Well, but we can just ask that they replant it.
Can you just pull it down a little bit more? Thank you.
My name's Yvonne Duffy. I'm one of the homeowners on Talbot. One of my greatest concerns.
What's your address, ma'am?
25 Talbot.
Okay.
Okay, it's the big brown house that he mentioned. One of my greatest concerns is, especially during the winter when we have the snowplow come down, a lot of the snow that gets plowed to the side actually narrows that 22 feet to one car. Where is the snow going to go from these apartments?
Where do the units that are at, the units that, all those units that have the address of 33 Talbot, where do they put their snow?
They pile it up on the side. On the property.
It's on their
They-
property,
Yeah, they have a green space.
Okay, so
that
they keep, because they've got green space, enough green
Yeah.
space, okay.
And that's where their leaves go, that's where the snow goes. Where is
Your
this?
concern is just on the snow, the snow.
Yeah,
and-
where's this extra stuff gonna go? I mean, we're already condensed for streets. You park on the street, you've got one car able to squeeze up and down. You put snow on the street, nobody can park. People need to park. And it's not doable. So you add 5 more units, 5 more families, visitors, it's not gonna work. I have children that play on the street. We have people coming up and down and having to turn because it's a dead end. You know, it's going to get too congested. That's my biggest concern. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Bonnie Casone, president of Byram Heights Association, Byram Heights Owners Incorporated, at 33 Talbot Lane. I wrote a letter to the commission when I first received word of these buildings. Our biggest concern also is traffic, emergency vehicles, most concerning to me. My unit, number 3, literally looks out onto the driveway and can see what's coming up and down Talbot Lane. And when an emergency vehicle goes up Talbot Lane, the only way it can exit is to back out, and it takes a very long time. And we're just concerned with more congestion there, more problems with those kind of issues, and getting emergency vehicles and garbage trucks and parking, you know, it's just going to be a problem. We would really like to see something done to that property as well, because it is an eyesore now. I think that the people who own it should definitely still be responsible for taking care of it. The grass is hugely overgrown. The bushes are coming onto the street. There are, I believe, 4 public parking spaces at the end of the street, but they're limited to time parameters. You're not allowed to park there during the day because there is a variance there for, I believe, the phone company. So we have 20 units at 33 Talbot Lane. Just to clarify, there are 2 8-building units and a 4-building unit there. Our parking rules say that you're only allowed to have 2 cars per unit on the premises, at all times. And if there are people who have more than 2 cars, they're not allowed to park on the premise and sometimes utilize one of those spaces or possibly even more on the street overnight. But Byram Road also has no parking, and the houses on Byram Road have people who park in the spaces on Talbot Lane as well. So it's just an issue all the way around with parking and emergency vehicles.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I have
Is
to
there anyone
figure-
else?
I figure, I go by this all the time too, and I don't remember.
All right, Casey?
So, what we heard that got added is that your landscape plan should look to preserve the screening between the 3840 and 34 Talbot.
I don't know if it needs to preserve it, just. could
Well,
be
preserve
replaced with
screening, I'm not saying the existing screening,
existing.
I'm saying preserve screening.
We'll screen it. I walked the
Somewhere,
site today.
and you've got
You
a
don't
large
want what's
pine
there.
that,
You need to make sure the large trees are clearly identified. On
Agreed.
the landscape plan, which one you're proposing to remove.
Agreed.
It looks like they have a nice maple in the front yard that you're getting ready to cut down.
No, sir. That's a beautiful Japanese maple. It's an unbelievable specimen
Well, I
tree.
just don't see it on the plan.
I know that you haven't had a chance to look at it closely, but I'll draw attention to it.
and then also the,
Well, and-
that
and-
large pine tree you were looking at on the west side?
So we are very, in our last hearing, we had a meeting where a developer said they're going to save a tree, and it wasn't accurately located on the survey, and then they come and beg for forgiveness because you're cutting into the roots from the drip line. So we really don't want to have that problem again.
I can
You say
appreciate
you're gonna
that.
save a tree, we need to make sure we're saving a tree.
And I think actually that Alexandra had a comment on that. And then, same thing, actually, did you see Alexandra's comments?
I have not. Oh, I have.
They're, because I think she makes a comment. I can't find it. Okay.
Well, tell you-
And in the meantime, the other things that we wanted to, that we heard is if you could make sure that the traffic and emergency vehicle access, well, particularly that you have a plan for garbage and snow removal for your property
Agreed.
and where your snow would go. It looks like you should have space, but, so if you would address those. It wasn't this one, okay.
Listening to some of the comments from the neighbors about traffic and so forth, and is there any way for you to just have one driveway into this property and not to have the 2 driveways into the property off Talbot? If you're going to reconsider the layout of this project and perhaps perhaps that would ease some of the concerns, as opposed to 2 areas where people can come out into Talbot, if you could reduce it to 1.
We'll consider that. And holistically, as you said, while reconsidering the site design.
Right.
I think maybe one of the first things you might look at is actually taking the rear building and just rotating it 90 degrees.
Mm-hmm. So that you create some sort of green space in front of the buildings?
Well, I think you can
Kind
get
of be
rid
a
of it.
parking courtyard.
Something in
where they
between the
would
buildings.
almost
behind
face
the
each
front
other.
one, in front of the back one.
But we could still face the front units, provide an appropriate street face. Okay.
I think if they went to one driveway, it would really save a lot but that's part of what's constraining them.
All right, now to schedule, does anybody else have any comments? No. Now to this, you want to talk about the schedule, Katie, what seems to make sense or not?
Right, so you're going to the Architecture Review Committee at the first October meeting.
We'll come back and discuss it with you, or we can chat about it tonight or both.
Okay, and I suspect you're going to need to give us extensions to get to the November meeting in terms of everything that needs to be completed with revisions to plans, so that's acceptable to you?
Yes, we're in agreement.
Okay.
All right, well, is that okay with you to work out the schedule of the
Yes.
department?
Yes, I just wanted
Now,
to
if-
make sure you weren't intending to come to one of the October meetings, frankly.
Okay.
So it's, as long as you understand that it's probably not enough time for
So
you to make
second
that.
October meeting is pretty tight, so
Yeah.
then we will not plan on seeing you.
Right, so I think that's more realistic
Gives you a little more
for
time.
you and for us.
Okay.
To be on the November meeting.
Okay.
And I believe you, and it appears you have enough time to do that. I know you've used some of your extension already.
We can get to the first meeting in November. We can see everybody 2 more times, so, or one
Okay.
more time as the case may be.
Okay.
And I'll come in.
If there's a disagreement with the ARC in the buildings and it's just not working out or whatever, we can have a discussion offline about getting to the October meeting if you need to have another discussion.
I still think
with
the ARC is, I think you should only be at the ARC, well, I don't know, after you've taken a shot at trying to resolve some of our issues.
Okay, I think that's a reasonable request, and I'll discuss it with the owners. It's not it's reasonable. It just, sometimes it's good to get some feedback, just like tonight. I'm grateful for your time and attention.
That's fine. But I just,
Well, you-
whatever they say to you, you can't forget what we said to you.
Well, I was thinking that
Yes,
they
sir.
would revise the plan per your comments and present that to the ARC is what I was
Well, that's
expecting
what
was
I'm
going to
Correct,
happen.
even if
That's what I
the
was trying to
engineering's not
say, but-
vetted, if we could see
Absolutely.
concept-wise, and I'm sure
And then work on-
staff may have good feedback as well.
Yeah, and then work on the engineering once you've got the layout down based on what the commission's told you tonight and then the subsequent ARC comments. And then work the engineering out after the fact, which is why I'm thinking that you're going to need that extra time.
Okay,
And that's what I was suggesting, if it's not going well, if there's a conflict or what have you, then on the concept level, I think you need to come back to the commission for that October meeting.
okay. I'm going to think about this, and I don't think it works in any way, shape, or form. One of the things we tried to do with this, we had come to you in the past, and we said, break up, let's have more individual buildings. I'm wondering if there's, and I have no idea, but if there's an L-shaped building, and that somehow creates the access that works well, as long as it creates the appropriate bulk at the street level, is that something that the commission just says, I just don't want to have one building? Or if we can create a architectural feel and street presence?
I think you've been down the road with the L-shaped one-building approach on another project with us,
And you didn't go very far.
and we,
You have a preference for?
Yes.
Okay, I appreciate that.
as long as there's
Frank feedback.
some space between them, yes.
Mr. O'Donnell, keep in mind the spirit of the new regulation for R6. Keep that in mind, and I think that will kind of go in that direction. I think that'll help you in the long run.
Okay.
And this is really why we wanted to do that regulation? This type of impact on the neighborhood, traffic-wise. Just saying, when we looked at how neighborhoods are impacted by multifamily, the traffic issues on a narrow street and things like that. Yeah, but just so
It's-
that he knows.
It's good feedback. I appreciate to know where you're coming from.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Number 14,
Casey, Pat's prepared.
Oneida, Indian Harbor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Larry Liebman from SE Minor representing the applicant. We stood before you on June 27th, where we received preliminary approval, and we were told to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and to work out all of the other issues that staff and town comments were made. Since then, we have been to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they have granted a variance. We have received new comments from the DEP saying that they have no further issues. We have received approval from the Health Department and the State Health Department.
You do, because we don't have that. The state,
It was just emailed to us during the meeting, so we have it now.
Okay, now
Well,
Andy
Merrick,
is-
but Merrick said at the meeting yesterday that we had it.
But we
at the
didn't have
briefing.
hard copy. Okay,
Okay.
good enough. Yeah.
We have done everything that was there. The project is for a site plan special, coastal site plan special permit for a project in excess of 150,000 cubic feet. The total volume is going to be 106.65 cubic feet, and it has also been...
No way that you can hit .65 cubic feet.
I didn't do the math. Thank you very much.
You can round it up for us.
Okay, okay. Point 201,107, thank you.
Will be good enough for us.
Thank you, sir. And it also has been, we also have comments from DPW saying that it's, that came in today.
Yes.
So I don't think that, if there's any questions, the architect and the attorney is here with us. If you would like, we can answer anything that you desire.
Any question from the commission? Any
Did we
questions?
talk about all those conservation comments? from
Yes, we
June?
did, and as a part of the comments,
Right, I
we,
just did not.
the plans,
I drew
the
a
new
blank.
plans show the routing of the wires, everything is better.
I am believing you. Okay.
Okay.
Tonight.
You okay? All right. Anybody in the, is there any public left? Then we'll close it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, you want to go forwards or backwards?
Let's
Done.
say, is this, we only have one,
You can go. That's the end of the public hearing.
we only have one set of minutes? I hereby move this, August 1st minutes as submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, folks, we got about 4 of them to do tonight, if we want to, and I think we should.
Yes, 10.
So where do you want to start? The last one first or the
You
first one last?
decide.
Okay, let's do the one we had just in front of us, Oneida.
Okay, hold on a second. Okay, so I hereby move approval of the final coastal site plan and special permit for Oneida, for 58 Oneida Drive, 58 Oneida Drive, and in so doing, we note that IWWA has issued a permit, that DEEP has issued no comment in their September 13 email, that the ZBA issued a special exception approval on August 9th, that both septic, local, and state endorsements have been obtained, that the Department of Public Works has endorsed a building permit, and that any other outstanding staff or departmental comments should be addressed. Do we need to make a comment about the previous nonconformity or anything like that? No?
What nonconformity?
Yeah, the stories.
Well, they got a ZBA on it. Why would we need to?
They only got a ZBA on part of it. Isn't that what we talked about?
Well, they got it on the size of the garage and the indoor athletic facility.
Right, and not on the,
Well,
not on the height and stories.
But those are existing conditions not affected by this application.
That's what we need to say. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is that the motion?
That's the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay. The next one is number 10.
Is number 10.
I hereby move approval of the text amendment proposed by Mill Post Realty LLC. And as it reads in the notice, in the public notice, in so doing, we note that we have received comments from Westcog that this is an application of only local impact, and that we find that this text change is consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development. Katie, would you add anything else to that? Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving right along.
Steamboat.
Steamboat. I hereby move approval of this final coastal site plan and special permit at 702 through 708 Steamboat. In so doing, we note that the ARC endorsed this application on June 7th, that the ZBA issued variances on April 4th for the number of units, that there are comments from the zoning, nope. Oh, yes, there's one comment from the zoning enforcement officer that the wall along the front line.
But we accepted that.
Accepted that, okay. And then there was one other comment from somebody, conservation, sorry, that we were going to include, were we not?
Yes, there was.
Oh,
some
the
notes.
increase in the amount of natives that the applicant has agreed to meet with Conservation Department and increase the number of native species to enhance the coastal habitat.
Second.
Hold on a
I
second.
would like to just make one note, just make a finding on this, that the zoning regulations that were in place at the time they appeared before the Zoning Board of Appeals and got that approval, the zoning regulations that were in place at that time shall apply to this project. And to further note what was submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals, because it was referenced in their decision, I had Pat today check those drawings in their completeness, and they are in fact complete set of floor plans, a complete set of elevations, and sections through the building clearly delineating that it's a three-story building in this particular zone, and that was what is approved by ZBA.
I have one other thing when you're done.
One other thing, well, DPW, I don't know if you got that or not, they approved because it was a tear down and there's less non-porous, and also that the sewer
Sewer was what I
today is okay.
had forgotten. The sewer division has some comments that should be addressed.
Yeah, but they're okay to go to the
Right,
permit
they're okay,
phase.
but there are comments that need to be addressed.
Other than that, I think that's it. Does anybody else have any other?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Two more. Yes, St. Barnabas.
St. Barnabas, that's it.
Hereby move approval of the final site plan and special permit to construct the 432 square foot addition at St. Barnabas Church. In so doing, we note that the special exception was granted by ZBA on 9th August, that any further comments from the ZEO should be addressed, that final acceptance of the FAR and volume calculation should be reviewed by zoning enforcement prior to the zoning permit, that the applicant has submitted an IWWA green sheet sign-off dated June 2nd, 17, that stormwater exemption forms were filed, and that the applicant returned to the ARC and gained approval at their meeting on 9/13 as the ARC had requested.
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye. Okay, last one.
65 Conyers.
Yep. I hereby move approval for this final site plan and special permit. In so doing, we note that the Department of Public Works, IWWA, and Health have all endorsed. And however, that the applicant should address the following comments from the ZEO. The plan should note the height of the dwelling. The proposed walls near the driveway entrance should be limited to a height of 3 feet within 10 feet of the edge of the driveway. And the pool house should be included in the FAR and volume calculations. The
And I
10-foot
think you
separation.
might want to say also that the zoning enforcement officer has in fact signed off on this as being able to,
Okay.
how do I want to say it? It comes under the Poirier decision. Is affected by the Poirier decision, and that's how he's getting away with some of these other things on the site.
Right,
So,
the regulations.
Right.
apply.
The
Do we want to say that?
And then
Okay.
I
We
think
can
we-
reference the state statute as opposed to saying the Poirier, whatever, it's 8-26
Yeah.
B2B.
Yeah,
And I think we should also state that the inland wetlands is approved.
we said that.
oh, that little nip,
That
that little
little
corner,
nip,
yeah,
yeah.
that it was
Okay.
8 foot 6 inches for the construction, yeah.
Okay,
Is okay.
good point. I said they had approved it, but I didn't.
Well, approved specifically that.
Okay.
Because we had brought it up as an issue in our review.
Okay. Now, we don't need to vacate, you said because it's expired, the 2008 approval. That was the thing I asked yesterday. Do we need to refer to it that it's expired and that only this approval?
You can note it just as a.
Okay.
notice.
Here, so noted.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Good night.